On Saturday, July 6th, a variety of church members who live and worship on Six Nations Haldimand Tract treaty territory gathered together for a strawberry Thanksgiving and communion event to mark the establishment of a sacred covenant between churches and Six Nations of the Grand River. The event centered on a proposal initially conceived of in 2007 in conversation with Haudenosaunee leaders Rick Hill, Adrian Jacobs, and the Mennonite Central Committee. This proposal suggested that churches who don't pay property taxes could make a token lease payment to Six Nations for the use of land within their treaty territory. This honors the fact that historic land lease agreements along the Haldimand Tract have not been recognized, and monies that should have been held in trust for Six Nations have been taken and not used for the benefit of the people of Six Nations. Additionally, it was suggested that churches establish the sacred covenant would direct their properties to Six Nations ownership if they ever disbanded. The CRC's leader for Indigenous Justice and Reconciliation, Adrian Jacobs, led the Strawberry Communion service by explaining what these treaties could look like and celebrating the steps that some churches have already taken.
Adrian was talking about the Strawberry Covenant, the spiritual covenant with churches, and I just thought it was a fantastic idea. And so I'm doing some initial listening to see what God might have in store for us as a church community.
The spiritual covenant is an interesting idea, being a resident in Caledonia. I've lived through so much of what Adrian shared this morning, and a spiritual covenant for a church is a wonderful idea, I think. And I'm thinking too in terms of homeowners in the area as well, living within the Haldimand Tract. That's something worth thinking and considering.
During the event, Sterling Avenue Mennonite Church presented a check to Six Nations Polytechnic. This amount represents 1% of Sterling's budget. The Polytechnic was chosen because it is an educational organization on the Six Nations Reserve that is contributing to the revitalization of culture and language. Sterling sees this as a first step in considering all the components of the proposal.
Our group at church did Hearts Exchange together, and one of the activities that we decided to try and do after that was have an Indigenous-led organization sort of have a spot on our regular offertory schedule. So our financial responsibilities in terms of reparations are also something that we talked about. So I don't think this idea is like too far from what we could be thinking more about. So I'm eager to sort of take this back to our group.
Attendees heard from Jacobs and leaders in the Mennonite community. Then they joined in a communion of bannock and strawberry juice together. The event finished with a hearty meal and good conversation around the many tables.
I received an invitation as a follow-up to my participation in the Hearts Exchanged program, a program designed by the denomination for individuals in the church or beyond to consider and further their own personal journeys toward reconciliation with First Nations peoples.
Participants of Hearts Exchange living in the area were specifically invited by Senior Leader for Indigenous Justice and Reconciliation, Adrian Jacobs. 7 different CRC churches were represented at the event and were encouraged to consider how their local congregations might establish a sacred covenant relationship with local Indigenous communities.
I read Adrian Jacobs' published article ahead of time that shared information about what was a concrete, tangible next step that organizations could take toward reconciliation and restitution. And I was very intrigued and thought, this is great. I'd like to hear more about people who are doing this already and consider how can we do this in my congregation and beyond in the Christian Reformed Church.
And I'm just glad that our church is a part of this, and that so many of us are sort of re-engaging with these stories, or for the very first time we're hearing these important stories.
Though it may take a while, to get there, it's worth the journey, right?